Today, we're going to take a look at the last time a Democrat was elected to the U.S. Senate in all 50 states. We already took a look at this for governor, and we'll also do the same thing for the Republicans coming up, but we're going to go through all 50 states and see the longest droughts for the Dems in the Senate. Now, this is just for the last time they were elected as a Democrat. We're not looking at independents, and we're not looking at appointments. Some states have had Democrats in office for a long time. Others, you've got to go back many decades. So I've got 8 tiers of shading here by decade, and we're going to go through these states alphabetically. So let's start in Alabama. That's the Yellowhammer state. No Democratic senators there, but you really don't have to go back that far. In the special election in 2017, that was when Doug Jones pulled off the upset for the Dems. He wasn't in there long, but that was the most recent time. Next, how about in Alaska? Well, for this, you've got to go back a little bit further. In 2008, Mark Begich was elected to his only term, and he's also the uncle of current U.S. Representative Nick Begich III. That last name does run deep in Alaska. Next, in Arizona, they've got 2 recently elected Democrats in office. Next, in Arkansas, it's a red state, but you don't have to go back that far. It's the same as Alaska, 2008. And Mark Pryor won his second term. It was by so much of a landslide that Republicans didn't even put up a candidate that year. Next, we've got recent senators in blue states. Those are going to be California, Colorado, Connecticut, and Delaware. What about down in the Sunshine State? Well, for that, you've got to go back more than 20 years, 2012. That was when Democrat Bill Nelson won his final term. Then we've got more recent Democrats in Georgia and Hawaii. What about Idaho? We know this is a red state, so how far back do you have to go? Well, for this one, you're going to have to go back pretty far. It's going to be 5 decades to 1974. You might not be familiar with the name, but Frank Church won his 4th term, and he was the last Democrat to win here. Next, in Illinois, they've got recently elected Democrats. Next door in Indiana, the year here is going to be back in 2012. Joe Donnelly won his only term to the U.S. Senate, and that was also a blown opportunity for the Republicans. In Iowa, 5-term Democrat Tom Harkin was last elected in 2008. The next state is Kansas, and the spoiler here is this state has the longest drought out of all 50. For this, the 1970s is not going to cut it. We've even got to go back several decades before that. The magic year here for the Dems was 1932. The name was George McGill. He was defeated 6 years later, and amazingly, the Democrats have come up dry here in the 9 decades that have followed. That is a seriously dominant red state streak. Anything is going to be a lot more recent than that, and the next state is Kentucky. Here we're going to go back to the early 90s, 1992. That was when Wendell Ford won his final term. In Louisiana, Mary Landrieu, who served 3 terms, won her last election in 2008. Fun fact, in that same year, she defeated current U.S. Senator John Kennedy. Next, in Maine, this is an interesting state. They do have current Senator Angus King, who's technically an independent, but he does caucus with the Democrats. So for the last person actually elected as a Democrat, we've got to go back several decades. This is going to be 1988, and George Mitchell won his final term in a massive blowout. Now we've got more current blue state Democrats. It's going to be Maryland, Massachusetts, Michigan, and Minnesota. Now back into the red states, we've got Mississippi. This one, we're going to be back in the 1980s. This is going to be 82. Longtime Democrat John Stennis, he won his final term that year. In Missouri in 2012, Claire McCaskill won her second and final term. In Montana in 2018, John Tester won his 3rd and final term. In Nebraska in 2006, that was the year that Ben Nelson won his 2nd term. He also defeated future governor and current U.S. Senator Pete Ricketts in a massive landslide. More blue states, we've got Nevada, New Hampshire, New Jersey, New Mexico, and New York. In the Sun Belt, in North Carolina, 1-term Senator Kay Hagan won her term in 2008. In North Dakota, the last Democrat to win here was Heidi Heitkamp in 2012. In Ohio, Sherrod Brown pulled it off not that long ago, back in 2018. In Oklahoma, another very red state. For this one, you're going to go back to 1990, and he recently died, but that was the year that David Boren won his final term, and he also won it in a huge landslide. In Oregon, their senators are recently elected Dems. In Pennsylvania, very recently, in 2022, John Fetterman won it for the Dems. Rhode Island has Democrats currently in office. In South Carolina, in the late 90s, 1998, that was when very long-time Democrat Ernest Fritz Hollings won his final term. In South Dakota, 2008, another great year for the Dems. Tim Johnson won his third and final term in office. How about in the volunteer state, Tennessee? For that, we've got to go all the way back to 1990. This is going to be a familiar name. Future Vice President Al Gore won his final term. In Texas, we're going to go back just a couple years before that, 1988. That was the last time Lloyd Benson won a term for the Senate. In Utah, we've got to go back a long time on this one, all the way back to 1970. Frank Moss was the last Democrat to win election here. Then we've got more current blue states. We've got Vermont, Virginia, and Washington. In West Virginia, it's also not that far back, just 2018, and that was when good old Joe Manchin pulled it off for the Dems. In Wisconsin, Tammy Baldwin was just reelected. And finally, in Wyoming, this is another significant drought. We're going back more than 50 years, all the way to 1970, and Gail McGee was the last Democrat to pull off the feat. So that's it. Those are all of the states. And of course, about half of these have Democrats currently in office. The other half, you've slowly got to go back decade after decade. Eventually, you come all the way back to 1932 if you want to find the longest active streak here. So that is more than 80 years for the Dems. They're either due to break that streak soon, or it seems like it's going to go on forever. Other huge droughts are in the red states of Idaho, Utah, and Wyoming. And in Maine, due to Angus King being an independent, that's why we have to go back so many decades there. But there's another handful of states that you have to go back more than 25 years for. With polarization the way it is, it's hard to imagine some of these streaks breaking anytime soon. It's always impressive to see how far back you've got to go when you look at some of this history. But if you're ever curious as to the last time each state elected a Democrat to the U.S. Senate, this is how the map would look. So let me know in the comments, which state out here surprised you the most? Even if you had a hunch it was Kansas, it's probably still shocking to go back that far. How about the senators in your state, and which of these streaks do you think might be snapped next? Let me know down below on your way out. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Join if you'd like to help support the channel. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.